In the past, we've talked about a good amount of name puns in Dragon Ball. We have covered the Earthlings, the Saiyans, the gods, the Namekians, etc. Today, we are covering all of the fighters that were in the Tournament of Power. Hey, how's it going? My name is Raph, and welcome to Dragon Ball Code, the place where all we do is talk about Dragon Ball. And today, we are looking at the name puns of all the fighters who participated in the Tournament of Power. So, let's begin. The first one we have is Universe 1, but Universe 1 did not participate in the tournament, so we move on to Universe 2. All the names of the characters in Universe 2 come from different types of meat, so let's find out who is what type of meat. Number 1, we have Brienne de Chateau with her annoying transformation, Brienne. Her name Brienne de Chateau comes from the Chateaubriand steak. This is a steak made with a thick tenderloin fillet. Next we have Rosie. Her name seems to be a pun on roast beef. And Kakunsa, this one is the one that fights like a cat or something. Her name comes from the Kansas steak. Then we have Vikal, the girl that looked like a vampire. Her name comes from kalbi, and these are Korean barbecue short ribs. Next we have a pretty obvious one, Zerloin with a Z. He is this huge man that kind of looks like Thanos from Marvel. His name comes from the sirloin steak. The next member of Universe 2 that we have is Zarbuto. His name comes from the zabuton steak, and the name of the steak comes from the pillows that the Japanese used to sit on. Then we have Rabanra. This guy looked pretty cool. His name comes from Baraniku. Next we have Hermilia, another warrior that looked very cool. With his hair and his skin color, he reminds me a lot of Blanca from Street Fighter. His name comes from harami. This is the word for skirt steak in Japanese. Next we have Prum. It almost sounds like the name could come from prune, but his name actually comes from rearranging the word rump. And lastly, the last warrior we have from Universe 2 is the Yardrat Jimizu, or however you say his name. His name comes from the Misuji beef. And those are all the fighters that fought in the Tournament of Power from Universe 2. Next is Universe 3. Universe 3 have very interesting fighters, but what's even more interesting is that most of the fighters from Universe 3 are named after Italian food. So let's start. The first one that we have on the list is Narirama. This was a robot that could extend his arms super far, and his name comes from the marinara sauce. The next one we have is Negrisi, the alien-looking dude with yellow abs. This guy's name comes from grissini, which are breadsticks. Then we have Paparoni. He is a cyborg that looks like a 1980s pop star. His name comes from pepperoni. Next on the list, we have Kato Pesla. He was the Power Ranger of the Tournament of Power. His name comes from pescatora, which means fisherman, but it's always used a la pescatora, meaning served with fish. The next one we have is the Pricho. This is the Universe 3 fighter that looked like who? Cell. His name comes from the Italian pizza capricciosa, which is a pizza that has anchovies. And I'm not gonna lie, that sounds disgusting. Then we have Viara, who was a huge android. His name comes from the arrabbiata sauce. He is followed by another robot, Pancia. Pancia comes from pancetta, which is an Italian bacon. Next we have Magicayo. He is the blue guy that could apparently turn into anything. And his name is a little different because it doesn't come from Italian food. It comes from a Japanese word, Magicajo. This is an expression used in Japanese equivalent to when we say seriously in English. The next one we have is Ballerator. He was this robot that for some reason reminded me of a frog. His name comes from the Japanese phrase for ripped off. Then we have Koitsukai, whose name also comes from a phrase. Koitsukai means so this is the guy in Japanese. And those are the 10 fighters, but there are also 2 fusions. Koichirator, which doesn't really mean anything, is just the names of the fused fighters together, and Anilaza. Anilaza was a huge fusion that took 5 of the strongest fighters of Universe 7 to beat: Goku, Vegeta, Frieza, Android 17, and Gohan. And his name comes from the Japanese word for lasagna. And with that, we finished all the fighters from Universe 3. So now it's time to find out where the names of the Universe 4 characters come from. The first one we have is Ganos, which I hadn't realized until now that he has chicken legs even in his normal form. And I can't believe I missed that. Anyway, his name comes from oregano. The next one we have is Shansa. His name comes from coriander in Chinese. Then we have Kawaii. Kawaii was hilarious. She was the one that when fighting Master Roshi decided to eliminate herself when he turned into a huge muscle man. Her name comes from Caraway. The next one we have in Universe 4 is Majora. Now this fighter I actually liked, from his look all the way to how he fought. He was also blind, which made him an even cooler fighter. The name Majora comes from the herb marjoram. The next one we have is Mona. Now this one I thought was pretty psycho. Her name comes from cinnamon. Gamisaurus is next, and he was a famous invisible guy from Universe 4, and his name comes from garam masala. Then we have Damon, who was the little bug dude that eliminated Piccolo. Then he was eliminated by 17. His name comes from cardamom. The next one we have is Durkori. She was another one that had very cool powers. Like Shansa, her name also comes from coriander. Number 9 is Shosa. This was the wolf that was eliminated by Krillin and 18. His name comes from Shoga, which is Japanese for ginger. And the last one that we have in this universe is Nink, the ogre with a ponytail. His name comes from the Japanese word for garlic. And those are the 10 fighters of Universe 4. Universe 5 did not participate in the Tournament of Power either, so we move on to Universe 6. So, let's begin. The first ones we have are the 3 Saiyans, Kaba, Caulifla, and Kale. Kaba, the only male Saiyan, his name comes from the vegetable cabbage. Caulifla, the feisty one, her name comes from the vegetable cauliflower. And Kale, the shy one, her name comes from the vegetable kale. Then we have Hit, the cool purple dude. Hit's name comes from the first part of the word Hitokiri. This word means assassin in Japanese. It also goes with the first part of the word hitman in English, which is super convenient when you translate it. Next is Frost, and his name is pretty obvious. Just like Frieza and his father King Cold, whose names come from cold things, Frost comes from the word frost. And frost, the word, is a thin layer of ice on a solid surface. Then we have Automagetta, the huge robot on their team. The part Auto comes from the word auto. The part Magetta comes from other Japanese series. The first part, Ma, comes from the robot Mazinger from the series Mazinger Z. And the second part, Geta, comes from the series Getter Robo. And it makes sense that his name comes from both of these series because both of them are about huge robots. Next is Botamo. He is the huge gummy bear, or as many call him, Winnie the Pooh. A huge version of Winnie the Pooh. His name comes from the Japanese dish Botamochi. It's a sweet dish made out of rice and azuki paste. It looks pretty interesting. We move along and we reach the 2 namekians of Universe 6, Sonel and Purina. Sonel, his name comes from putting together the words sea and snail, and Purina comes from the mollusk Pelina. Then we have Dr. Rhoda, the one that supposedly had an amazing ability that he was going to use, but he was eliminated and didn't do anything. His name? I don't really know where it comes from. So if you know where the name comes from, please let me know in the comments because his name could literally come from anywhere. And that finishes Universe 6. Our main universe is next, Universe 7. First off, we have our main guy, Goku. The name Son Goku comes from sound reading Son Wukong from Chinese to Japanese. So basically, Son Wukong sounds like Son Goku in Japanese. Son Wukong is the main character in the story Journey to the West, and Dragon Ball is loosely based on this story. The name Son Wukong means monkey grandchild aware of emptiness. Kakarot, which is Goku's original name, comes from the vegetable carrot. Then we have the Prince of all Saiyans, Vegeta, who is actually the king now because the former king is dead. His name comes from the word vegetable without the last 3 letters. The next one we have is Goku's oldest son, Gohan, and we all wish that Gohan was a lot stronger now, but it is what it is. The word Gohan means rice in Japanese. Next is Master Roshi, who in the Tournament of Power really showed what he was made of. He was crazy. His name means Old Heavenly Martial Arts Master. Then we have Krillin, who I wish had done better in the tournament. He was just eliminated too fast. His name comes from the chestnut. After him, we have Tianxin Han, who was eliminated super fast too, and his name comes from a rice meal. Next, we have the androids. Androids 18 and 17, the Beast, original names are Lapis and Lazuli, which when they are put together become lapis lazuli, which is a semi-precious stone. After those two, we have Frieza, the one that we would have never thought was going to be in the team, and after he was in the team, we thought he was going to betray Goku. He is one of the worst enemies Universe 7 has ever had. His name comes from where you store food, a freezer. And then we have another cool guy, Piccolo. And no, his name does not come from pickle. I don't know where that came from. The name Piccolo comes from the musical instrument piccolo. With that, we finish Universe 7, and we move on to Universe 8. But Universe 8 did not have any fighters in the tournament, so we move on to Universe 9. The first fighter we have in Universe 9 is Lavender. This was a fighter that could poison anybody that he touched. His name comes from the lavender herb. He is followed by his brother Bergamo, and this is the one that can absorb the damage taken and grow bigger the more he gets hit. His name comes from the bergamot orange. Next is Basil, the last brother of the trio the Danger. He is the one that mainly fights with his legs, and his name comes from Basil. Next we have Oregano, who didn't really do anything. His name comes from Oregano. Hop is next, and she is one of the two female fighters in Universe 9. Her name comes from the hop plant, which is primarily used in beer. Hyssop is the next one, and his name comes from the hyssop plant. It's pretty interesting that the color of his skin is the same color as the flowers of the plant. Next we have Comfrey, and his name comes from comfrey. He is followed by the other female in Universe 9, Sorrel. This is the rabbit girl, and I actually liked her design. Her name comes from the sorrel plant, and we're almost done. The next one we have is Chapel. He was the metal dragon who didn't do much either. His name comes from Chervil. And finally we have Roselle, the green dude that was able to fly, and his name comes from the Roselle plant. This was a universe that wasn't great and didn't do good at all, but they still had some good fighters like the Trio of Danger, which those were pretty good. But anyway, those are all the fighters of Universe 9. Next is Universe 10. So for Universe 10, most of the names come from elements. The first fighter we have is Lilibel. Her name comes from beryllium. Next, we have Methiop. He is a red lobster looking dude. His name comes from the element promethium. Next, we have Murisarm, and his name comes from samarium. Jelkal is next. He is the blue dude, and his name comes from the element zirconium. After him, we have Obuni, and he was the last fighter standing from their team, and in my opinion, he was really good. He was fighting with Gohan, and he was doing good. His name comes from the element niobium. Then we have Napapa, who was a sumo wrestler, and his name doesn't come from an element. His name comes from napalm, which is actually a flammable liquid. The next one is Zeum, and his name doesn't come from an element either. His name comes from the last three letters of most elements, I-U-M, Eum. Then we have Rubalt, and his name comes from the element cobalt. Next, we have Molithum, who I thought was going to be really strong and do a lot of damage, but he didn't. His name comes from the element lithium. And the last fighter we have in Universe 10, wow, that was really fast. Jirasen. This guy reminded me of Zarbon, but pink. And he didn't do anything either. He got eliminated by accident by Ribrianne, and that was pretty funny. His name comes from the element praseodymium. And that is Universe 10. Next we have Universe 11. So for Universe 11, most of the names come from things in the kitchen. The first fighter we have is Casserole. He was the cyborg dude, and his name comes from casserole. Next, we have Zoirei. He was the ram-looking alien that had a tornado move. His name comes from the Japanese word for refrigerator. Then we have Dispo, who was the super fast fighter. His name comes from garbage disposal. See, garbage disposal. Next is Cocotte, and her name comes from the French Dutch oven. After her, we have Topo, and this was the candidate to become a god of destruction. His name comes from pot. Then we have Kettle, the guy who looked like a catfish. His name comes from an appliance used to heat water. Then we have Wan. His name comes from the Japanese pronunciation of oven. Next, we have Tupper, who was the one who could become a super heavy person, and this name comes from Tupperware. Then we have Kunshi, which comes from the Japanese word shinku, that means sink. And the last fighter we have in Universe 11 is Jiren. He was the strongest guy in this universe, and it took Goku, Frieza, and 17 to take him out. His name comes from rearranging the word Renji. This is a type of stove. If you want to check out the angel names, check out this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.